Hi, I'm Alice. My pronouns are she, they, and this is Outside the Box, a special episode which I can say is a sequential episode 7 or some sort. But yeah, I already mentioned my pronouns as she, they, and I'm with my very special guest who's happy to join the show and is happy to talk about RWBY. So I'd like to introduce you to Azure. So hi there.
Hello, my name is Azure Bolt. My pronouns are also she, they, and I'm kind of excited to be here.
Great. So today we'll be discussing with the Volume 9 of RWBY, but I'm also going to be discussing about the future of RWBY going forward. So, Volume 9 of RWBY has recently came out on Crunchyroll, and it is available with all 10 episodes. We allowed some extra time after the finale, and to be honest, it's a huge one. Did you think?
I thought so, but I'm kind of mixed because I honestly liked the 7 and 8 finale as much as I have my gripes with both of those volumes.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, so basically the plot is that it's already at 9 seasons, is much longer than the Game of Thrones, but we call them like 9 volumes, not seasons. And I think it's just like whenever we mention seasons, we just get told to say volumes, say volumes. But yeah. But anyhow, so the plot is that RWBY and her friends have fallen down to some mysterious, magical, alternative world known as the Ever After. And it's up to them to use the book that's based on Alice in Wonderland so that you can head over to the tree so they can get back to Remnant. So it runs for like 10 episodes with 18 minutes each. And to be honest, it kind of started off like really weak, but eventually it's gotten really better towards the second half, which has a lot of really good moments. And I suppose you agree with that, right?
I can agree somewhat. Though I will admit the first half made me laugh my ass off.
So what kind of moments are you saying this really makes you laugh out loud?
Just as, like, for example, like when Yang described who stole her arm. Just that deadpan delivery was excellent.
It's a Rocket Raccoon. I just can't believe like they just pulled from the MCU and say like Rocket Raccoon is responsible for stealing her arm. So, but anyway, I think it's just going to go into some spoiler territory. So I think there was some like crazy parts of that episode, and I think to be honest, that Weiss, she started as a rival to RWBY, and she's like a Vegeta, but then she just amounted to like getting a whole lot of like side plots, arcs completed, and now she's just acting as some kind of comic relief because she's skeptical about Ever After being the same as the Alice in Wonderland story. So because the heroes are trying to like recreate all the steps they need to go through like the Alex's story in order to know what to do and take which steps to get to the tree. But I think it's just like goes into some silliness with it. So, yeah.
Honestly, that, like, they really needed a straight man to everybody else's and the Ever After shenanigans. And Weiss was the person to do it.
So that's really interesting. Well, to me, I think that Blake is the one who's like the most optimistic one. Like after she went through all the White Fang stuff, she eventually like comes over to the Ever After, but ever since she fell, she just like became more optimistic and intends to like bring the heroes over to the tree. And I think it's when the roles are completely like established, like you have Yang, you have RWBY, who just often like gets really depressed and has lots of problems with herself. But it's clear like with Weiss, like as you say, the straight man of this, as well as a comic relief. And Blake is the one that's like more of an optimist, so I think it's clearly established the roles with the whole team, and then it's just like, yeah, just heading over and just dealing with a lot of weirdness with the Ever After. I mean, do you notice like how, whether you agree, it's meant to be weird and wonderful with it?
Yeah, you have to agree. I mean, the whole illusion behind a lot of characters was Alice in Wonderland. So it has to be that kind of surrealist, nonsensical kind of logic there.
Yes, and I think you were commenting like how the color scheme and the visual effects, especially with the animation, and I think it's one of the tender parts with it, which some of it is like oversaturated, but other parts is just like really does work well, especially with the design and the bridge, and there's even like some effective lighting in some areas, which really makes this show good. Well, this volume at least.
I'm honestly just surprised that despite the oversaturation in certain aspects, like I won't lie, the Curious Cat being one of them, but surprisingly, they don't really clash that much wherever they're present.
Yeah, and I think eventually it's just like, it's just a little bit saturated, but then eventually it's just like they got the colors right and get those kinds of lighting, which they gave it this weird and wonderful aspect. And honestly, when you talk about the Curious Cat, I eventually learned about the reasons behind them. But it's also even surprising like how much they work into this cat. And even it's like the only character, at least possibly in the whole show, to not have an outline.
I think you're right. Let me go take a look at that real quick.
But yeah, so I also like to mention like the first 6 episodes. I think there's some like interesting moments, like some fight scenes. There's also some like crazy parts with it. But I think that what really didn't work for the first 6 episodes is that the beginning is like tries to throw in so many ideas into the table. It kind of like rushes through all those ideas and it just doesn't really work out. So then the second episode, a bit of a follow-up, but the rest of the episodes are just like, it's really interesting ideas, but it just makes you think as if the episodes are way too short to properly explore the environments, the ideas, and I just feel like it just doesn't really pan out in the end. So I'm afraid it's just like, it kind of like makes it weak. But as for the comic relief, it's certainly there. So I just feel this might work for some, but to me, I think it's kind of a bit agreed as if the first half is pretty weak in comparison with the other episodes.
You can tell that they really wanted to do more exploring because like the panoramic view of all the different acres. Again, you can tell they wanted to go to other places, but they just didn't have the time. Either they were crunched, or they had to direct more resources to the Justice League crossover movie.
Yes.
And either way, I can understand to an extent because of the position they are in on account of just behind the scenes stuff with Warner Brothers, but that's beside the point.
Yeah, the models from the Beacon days, they're in as flashbacks just to like challenge the girls to like try to get their identities challenged and tries to stand up for who they are.
I kind of enjoyed that scene. Actually, I will not lie. That was my favorite episode.
Oh, the episode 4. Nice.
Yes.
Also, there's this like I think the Herbalist, and it sounds kind of a bit like it just sounds as if Jim Cunning's just like voiced this character with this gravelly voice. But yeah, it's just
also I don't mean to interrupt, but I did check the image of the Curious Cat, and you are correct, there weren't really any outlines, but take a look at this concept art for said cat.
Yeah, I saw that concept art, and I think those like goes into the more like not so abstract, and there's some like more fluffiness to it, and it's only like the white one is considered. But spoiler alert, it's just the white one is actually the what was the chosen one, and then it had like black squares with a glitch chromatic effect on it to show its like darkest form. So yeah, but yeah, I think the concept art and all the designs to put into this whole thing is just like makes it so good.
I just like how the designers were able to just pretty much go ham with both color and character design. It's definitely a nice turnaround compared to all the dreary colors of Solitas and just Mantle and Atlas in general.
Yeah, I agree. And Ever After is like boasts some like really fantastical designs. And I think I have to say that when the Miles said it's going to be weird and wonderful, I think they just mentioned it to be like it's more subversive from the Remnant than just like going for the trippiness, which is what I've been expecting. And I kind of expected a bit too much from it, because I think what the Ever After does is just kind of goes to the subversion and goes with all ideas that you don't normally expect on Remnant.
The most, back to episode 4, the most pleasant surprise I had was the voice actor for the Herbalist, which was Christopher Guerrero, who is best known as Ainz Ul Gon and Overlord, which is a complete opposite end of his range. When I looked at the credits, I was like, that was him?
Really?
Yeah, it was.
It's because I don't know I'm familiar with it, but I think when I get into editing, I'll just like check and then see the kind of voice actor. But I think there's some really good voice actors in it too. Like there's someone who plays like Summer, has also been like voicing some really interesting characters, including the character from Honey Pop. That's crazy. And then the Curious Cat is voiced by, as it's been mentioned in the channel, which is, I think it was, I don't know, because
it was Robbie Damon, and if I recall correctly, he was the voice actor for Tuxedo Mask in the Viz redub for the original Sailor Moon series.
Yes, and also the Akiko from like Persona 5, and he also, relevant to the Xbox fans, Chai from Hi-Fi Rush. And his voice is almost similar to the Curious Cat. So Robert Damon is actually like a really, really top actor. And yeah, he did a fantastic job of the Curious Cat. Now, moving on, over to like the last half of this whole volume, there's some like huge moments. There's a reveal that John is actually like got old. And I was expecting he would turned around by some madness, and I'm like, oh no. And it turns out that he does a John by picking up a fruit and just went back in time, so it caused him to age. It's like, it's crazy. But he turned out far better than I expected. He knows about the Ever After. He has history, like as if he's been over to the special world. And I think it's just what really makes this volume more interesting. And it's also what makes it like much better than the first half, because he's been through, like, he just went through, met Alex, he went through and learned secrets of the Ever After, and he has assumptions of what's going to happen, only to have a Curious Cat as his enemy. So, oh wow, it's crazy.
I honestly really loved Jean's character arc in that volume. Like, everybody, like, people were joking that when we had the Volume 9 trailer, that if that was Jean, he was going to have, like, a guts arc, and the fact that the fandom was correct on that assessment, I found hilarious.
Yeah, that's right. Could have been guts, and in fact, he was more of a suffering guy because he just like became really grouchy and has a huge responsibility on his shoulders, which turns out he's been hard on himself. And I think it's what really makes Volume 7 fantastic, because he actually like has to protect this village only to lose it. And honestly, he's just like pushed to extremes on his own mentality. But also in episode 6, Bumblebee Kiss, what do you think?
Again, this is why I'm glad the fandom, like, this isn't a big podcast, because, one, I don't hate Bumblebee, I'm just kind of meh on it, and when we finally got the payoff, I'm just like, we waited, like, at least 4 seasons for this?
Yeah, I don't blame you, because I think the fandom, even if it's, like, really loyal, they seem to, like, be so, like, getting so fussed up about the kind of ships there. Like, I think it's obvious, like, you see more Black Sun in the first 4 seasons, and then eventually it goes into Bumblebee, which the crewbie has admitted that this has been, like, a huge idea. They only, like, sown the seeds of it in, like, volumes 1 and 2. But I think what really bothers me is that even though it has shown, like, the biggest moments in, like, volume 6, volume 9 is just, like, has them flirting with each other, they're making jokes at each other. Only in like episode 6 they go for the huge kiss. And I just feel that the build-up is a bit awkward. Like they should have, like with Blake trying to confess her feelings on whether she's worried about Yang, and the same way with the Yang feeling about Blake. Also, Blake and Yang has just somehow been reunited a bit too quickly in episode 1, and we could have been like to see more anxiety, and especially over their feelings on their relationship in the one up to like episode 6. And then we get the huge kiss, which many definitely say as if it's a huge moment, but not everyone agrees.
That I can agree with, and you can tell, again, that's another plot point that got horribly rushed due to behind-the-scenes shenanigans. And I have to say, like, on the off chance anybody sees this and tags either Barb, Aaron, or both, I'm sorry, you guys hyping it up kinda just spoiled it.
I don't seem to, like, know too much about it, but I think they just definitely like put up images, and looking back, yeah, they definitely put images to say, oh, the kiss is coming, but I think they just tried to be so subtle that, which they didn't seem to be subtle enough to say like, yeah, Aaron Saint, who even went into tears during the recording, which could suggest as if she has more intimate moments with Yang. And that's even like about 1 or 2 years before the Volume 9 came out.
I'm absolutely not going to deny that their voice acting for those scenes is pretty damn good.
Yeah, I agree.
And that's just coming from somebody who has the natural cadence to be mistaken for Barb on multiple occasions.
Yeah, honestly, Barb could have improvised for Yang a bit more and like give her like more puns with it, because Yang is very punny, and when you have like Yang, she's supposed to make all those puns, and there isn't a lot of puns on every volume.
Yeah, sometimes with the writing, especially with some aspects of Bumblebee in this volume, Rooster Teeth kind of had the subtlety of the Volume 6 train wreck.
Yes, that's right. And I think the Rooster Teeth, like, unfortunately, with all the controversy and all the PR, it's just like kind of like lets down the people's expectations. And yet fans definitely enjoyed it. And also with the non-fans, I don't think it's got enough to convince the naysayers. But one of the worst things, which I feel, which also turned into possibly the biggest debate so far, is there's a suicide allegory. RWBY was like really depressed. It's been hammered on like every episode. She's been dealing with depression and given choices or whether she wants to be someone else. And yeah, I have to say that it's really natural for the other characters just to like didn't talk to her, because when I get depressed, people don't seem to like know about how I'm feeling and all this stuff. And it's just like, it's fine. But I think it's been like romanticized so much that RWBY's depressed, and there's been too many times when the other characters like try to talk to her and then gets interrupted. And I think it just leads to this really good moment in like episode 7 that RWBY just like vented and gets really angry into this breakdown and then gets shouted back at John, and I think this is like the strongest scene in this whole volume.
100% agreed there. My only complaint is, Yang, honey, you're her older sister. What are you doing, honey? Like I can understand like the natural instinct to just like kind of like protect your partner, but at the same time, like, one, don't infantilize Blake. 2, again, you're RWBY's older sister. I know you're like, there's a difference between coddling and being like, hey, you can talk to me.
Yeah, definitely, because I think like in the fandom, it's just like they were so into Yang. They even said that Yang has no flaws, but I think there's obviously some parts with her portrayal in like Volume 9 that even though it may seem to be more natural, I think it's been like made as if like she's really not that supportive, and I think there's a lot of ironic moments to do with her, so it's just like, yeah, it's not too great.
Yeah, it's like that, and it's coming from me who really loved Yang, but now it's just kind of like I have fallen off because of Volume 9. Like, again, honey, you need to be Ruby's sister occasionally, and this was one of those times.
Yeah, because when I mentioned, like, Yang and Ruby, like, Yang is more critical of Ruby in, like, Volume 8, and then she, in doing Volume 9, she even, like, compared Ruby to Ironwood. It's, like, crazy. When I brought this up in the fandom, I was told, like, oh, that's preposterous, and there's even times where Yang really cared for Ruby. But if you look at that Volume 9, it's that Yang is supposed to be the one who talks to Ruby. She did interact with Ruby many times, but these didn't actually help. And I think she's, like, more antagonistic, so that's not good.
Plus, if I recall correctly, we kind of already hammered that point in Volumes 7 and 8, when, like, everybody called Ruby out on it after talking to Ironwood, and then he's just, you know, they're just talking behind his back.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot of stuff to go through, but I think we need to move on. That the suicide allegory, episode 8, is by far the darkest episode, like, of the entire show. Ruby gets tormented by Neo, sent her doppelgangers through, and somehow it's just like, oh my gosh, it's so terrible. Brought up doppelgangers of her dead, all those dead characters, and being, like, roughed up Ruby. But I think it's even worse is that, one, not only the Curious Cat, I like the villain turn, and that is a really good twist, I have to admit. But he went in to possess Neo right through the mouth, and it's like, oh my gosh, that's crazy. But you know what's really bad? Little getting crushed to death by Neo's foot. And then Ruby drinks tea, which causes her to ascend, which is a metaphor for her committing suicide, when the show did actually say that tree is not meant to be like death and rebirth. But I think there's a lot of messaging to suggest it is, in fact, like, it is definitely to do with, like, rebirth. And there's also a lot of messaging to suggest that she has been so depressed that she even, like, did something as if she wanted to reset her life. And it's just crazy.
Again, I have to agree with that. I am all for, like, mind games with villains. I adore it even. But as somebody who struggled with, like, similar thoughts, I feel like the allegory could have been done so much better. And I know we get the viewer discretion is advised kind of warning, but I feel like this was one of the times where they really needed to talk about what exactly they were about to cover.
Yeah, but I think to me that if it wasn't for Volume 8, it's good. And it even, like, shows Ruby, like, deciding to see if she becomes a different person. And Volume 9 and 10, it just, like, helps with that. But when you factored in, like, episode 8, when she's being tormented by Neo and gets cursed to, like, suicide, it's just like, that went too far. Like, it's seen as suicide. And yet fans have, like, went in to defend the show for, like, it's not suicide, it's Ruby, like, deciding to ascend. And that's just when they end up patronizing people who saw all those messages to suggest that she's been driven to suicide, and it's just so bad.
Exactly, and we didn't exactly know what Ascension was at the time. We just unless you're, like, a hardcore theorist, we kind of just went with Jean's explanation of it. And people were getting really worried about that. But something interesting about the episode itself, when we have the Volume 9 intro, my roommate called something like that.
Yes, but I would say this is, like, really messed up. Also, the episode 9, yeah, it's more like a drama towards the finale, and I just feel like it's a half-baked episode. Like, not only is just, like, the editing is more rigid, like, it just keeps jumping between the arcs with Ruby in Judgmental Critters world and the heroes, like, clashing with the Curious Cat. But it's also, like, it's been made too short, and it doesn't give enough time for the characters to grieve, and they instantly, like, accept that Ruby chose to ascend, and there's only a sliver bit of Yang, like, getting really worried and upset over RWBY like trying to ascend. So this is easily the worst episode for me.
It's also just confusing because I can understand like being the ever after is a bit confusing and it's a bit like emotionally difficult, but when I saw that, I'm like, dang, couldn't you have done that last episode?
Yeah. Well, I mean, she was a bit too late for RWBY like drinking tea, but then again, I think, imagine what Yang could have ended up like seeing like Pyrrha of some sort, or even John. But in episode 9, John met up with Penny and Pyrrha, and I'm like, oh gosh, but that's only for like 5 seconds. Anyway, so episode 10, huge finale, and honestly, like, there's RWBY like, okay, let's put it this way. Because of RWBY took a suicide attempt, and it's just like, it's just gonna turn into one of the some bullshitty outcomes. Like, either she turns out to be the same, she either becomes a different person like Summer, for instance, or she also is likely to turn into, well, an upgraded version of herself, which is pretty much a repeat of Genlock, where Sursa gives you a power-up. And guess what they have to end up with? RWBY decides to be herself, just to prove that it's about being yourself. But the fight scene that follows it, that's really cool, I have to admit. I like it. But that's only for like the first 10 minutes of it. So what's your thoughts on this?
I'm gonna be real with you. Even before the whole "I love you just the way you are" line, I called that RWBY was going to remain the same. Because, again, RWBY's the main character. If they suddenly like jump the shark and fulfill the crack theory like RWBY turns into Summer, I feel like that would have divided the fan base so flippin' hard.
Yes, I don't blame you, but I think, to be honest, like, RWBY becomes a different character and this like that, but yeah, that's also a bad outcome. But then she gets a power-up, and it's also a bad outcome. But the reason that she becomes herself is just like, she doesn't have any changes, apart that she went through the journey and has to like release her burden. Like, internally you can see the changes, but then she just remains like same in appearance. And then she just comes out into Falkio. It's just like, that's it. How
did you feel about getting another Red Like Roses to follow that?
I have to say that's pretty good. I hope it comes out as a actual full track. And I also like Trapdoor because it's the first volume where Casey did all this work since Jeff left, and she was with Martin, and she did some like really amazing tracks for the whole volume. And I have to say, the music choices in it, that is really good. That is really lots of good songs, and even like comes close to like OK Goodnight, and that's really good.
Especially, my favorite track is actually in the Red Prince's game.
Is it Checkmate?
I was a sucker for that.
Yeah. Mind you, it's the same music track that's heard in the trailer, which is called Checkmate. And yeah, it's actually really jazzy, and then it goes into like really good beat. So I have to say, yeah, it's cool. We definitely hope for the ODST to come out, but we only got the opening, and that one is so good. It goes well with the intro, and it's like, wow, it's great.
It really does. Even though it's not my favorite opening, I still, like, it's growing on me.
But anyway, so the ending, I think to me, it's just like, there's a huge infodub about the gods, and it's been pointed out, it's the same one as this exposition in, like, Volume 4, where it talks about the God Brothers. Only it's just, like, adds a little bit of a context to say they're born in the ever after, and it's like, okay. But then it eventually leads into like John getting de-aged, and it's like, no, why you do that? Like, after he's spent so much time with the ever after and aged, I liked him for that. And then they decided to reverse that as if it kind of avoids the consequences of his actions. And now when you have John and RWBY not physically changed, it kind of suggests it's a filler season, only that Carrie on RWBY Roundtable, which is a YouTube series anyway, he said it's not a filler season, but because there's a lack of changes to do with like RWBY and John, and even with Little and Jupiter like staying there ever after, it just makes you question like whether he was being honest about this being the filler season when it's not going to introduce a lot of changes over to it. It just leads to the ending where all the ships appeared above Fakio and that's it.
Oh man, I would have killed for Jean to not revert back. I would have loved to see Nora, Ren, and Oscar's reactions and everybody else's reactions to see Jean just like disheveled like that.
Yeah. Well, to me, I really prefer the old Jean, and I think this is going to be a huge thing, but I think it's just a case of writers like don't seem to account the fact he comes over and now he just makes some more complications with it. And it just seems as if the writers are not willing to like go through a lot of dynamics with it. But to me, I was kind of a bit disappointed with the episode 10, but there's a lot of good moments in it to convince people that this is by far like the best episode. But I think to me, with the entirety of 49, I think it's just like, it doesn't have all the reasons to convince the naysayers. I don't think it like supports the hype that it could have been trippy, it could have been just as fun as like Red Dwarf or Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, and it could have been more surreal, but fans absolutely enjoyed for its moments, all of this like subversion, and there's even like really strong moments which I can understand why they picked 49 to be like the best volume. To me, it kind of contested with the volume 6, but to me, it doesn't really beat the quality of like volume 3, which is like huge in such a huge way. What would you think?
Volume 9 wasn't the best, but I can easily say in my book, it was better than 5 at the very least. 6 is debatable because 6 had Maria Calavera, and she carried that volume.
Yes, she did definitely carry the volume, and she is one of the better characters in the show. But you said you were like a bit conflicted about the whole show at the beginning of the podcast, this episode. So, what makes you think of that? Like
between the heavier aspects of episode 8 kind of being fumbled, like not even kind of, they fumbled the bag with that allegory.
Yes, I agree.
And then there were just some episodes that were a bit weak. Again, I felt the Bumblebee payoff was a bit disappointing, but there is one thing that made me feel touched that I forgot to mention when we were discussing the early half of Volume 9. And that was the scene where Ruby offers Penny's former blade to the guards as a gift to the Red Prince. That monologue actually made me cry. And it is extremely hard for me to cry for a series because I'm just so used to things being downright depressing.
Yeah, and that is really a strong scene. And yeah, it's interesting you did cry for it. For many others, that they actually cried at the outcomes in like episode 10 or even 6. It's just like, I think there's a lot of like huge sentimental moments, and I think, yeah, it's just like really strong moments in like 49. But anyway, to me, just to wrap this up, I would say 49, it's good, but it's not as like perfect as I hoped. But I would definitely say that if you followed RWBY all the way and you love the show, you'll definitely love this volume. But I don't think it's going to convince anyone who's been like negative towards it or even dropped after volumes 3 and 4. Not something it's worth trying to catch up and get over to volume 9, because you have to go through like volumes 5 and 8 in order to get to it. So I think if you're like a RWBY fan, you would definitely enjoy it so much.
I would absolutely agree with that. If you're somebody who's just like a diehard RWBY fan, or somebody that prefers to see a series to the end, whether that means cancellation or a series finale, and this is coming from somebody who binged the series in like a couple months.
Yeah.
Actually, no, that's a lie. I was like 5 months.
Yeah. Well, mind you, it's been like delayed for like 2 years. It's like, oh, it's crazy. And then you get 49 and people are just like loving it, and they now want 10 to happen. To me, the chances are that 10 could be greenlit is when it will be announced in RTX, but it really depends if they just instead talk about part 2 of the Justice League movie. So do you think this is a likely outcome for the future of RWBY at the moment?
I say it is completely up in the air between PR controversies in the fall of 2022, controversies regarding David Zaslav's cancellation of several animated programs after the Discovery merger in the summer. I feel like if Volume 9 and the Justice League movie flopped, then I feel like he's going to eye that and just cut it off. And if he doesn't allow that property to be acquired by somebody else, it's not looking good for the series, in my opinion. It is such a toss-up.
I just think, to me, that cancellation can happen. Like, when Caden is being given a Ask Me Anything thing on Reddit and gets asked about the state of RWBY, she's happy to see the series come to the conclusion. But when they somehow give her the reply to say that about the cancellations, she didn't take them out of the question, saying it could happen any time. So it is possible that RWBY could be cancelled, but I think it just seems the more the eggs are found in one basket to do with the Justice League movie, because there's, instead of getting a post-credits scene, you instead get this huge trailer, and I think this is just ridiculous. But it also seems as if Rooster Teeth really wants to bring this movie out and wanted to sell well. So I think, given the harsh reception to it, I think it's a little bit worrying to see how this performs in order to save RWBY Volume 10.
I can agree with that, despite, I'm going to be honest, not having any time to watch the movie. I just also think it's very hilarious that Warner Brothers canceled a ton of DC movies that people were looking forward to, but somehow this still managed to see the light of day.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, I think there's a lot of irony, and also it just seems like Rooster Teeth is yeah, cool, but honestly, I think there are far better opportunities for crossovers, especially with anime, and even Carrie said it could be paired up with Studio Trigger productions, Kill la Kill or some sort, and not with Justice League, because it just kind of makes it a bit of a more awkward crossover. So, but yeah, I think this is just ridiculous. But I think yes.
Sorry. I very much enjoyed the idea of another anime adaptation. Shaft did a good job, but I have to say that Trigger was my first choice.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it was, because you have to have a studio well known for its fight scenes, well known for its action content. Shaft's more well known for its ability to create more magic stuff. So they were able to portray semblances and dust usage very well.
Yeah, that's really good. And also there's Ice Queendom anime. It's just it's alright, but then I think it's a step in the right direction for RWBY and even the visuals. But even though the character design is a bit off compared to the visuals of Volume 9, but I think it's just it should be regarded as an anime, then RWBY has some Western superheroes, which kind of makes me irk a bit more.
You should just be glad that Gen Urobuchi was a animator for that series and not a writer, because it would have been on par, if not worse, than Volume 9, Chapter 8.
Yeah, exactly. But I think at the moment it's just it's a bit uncertain. I can see this having more updates during the RTX, which happened around June or July, and we're most likely going to be seeing news to do with part 2 of the film. They will definitely say something about Volume 10, but when it comes to having it greenlit, that's kind of a bit up in the air. But even if it's greenlit, it's going to take a year or two before it will come over, and I just feel that with that extra time, which is going to happen because Kirby has already let go of the animators, which they need to collect again. I just feel the hiatus is quite likely to draw more fans and just fed up waiting for it. But then it could be another Dragon Prince, so I don't know.
What I'm going to miss most if Volume 10 gets greenlit, I am very much going to miss Josh's performance as Tyrion.
Yes.
I understand why they left. They were extremely justified in doing so. But I don't know anybody who can match the absolute insanity that was Tyrion Callows.
I think I could like do the impression of him. It's like, yes, don't mind if I do. But I don't know. It's a pretty bad impression, but then I think it just depends if they're going to find anyone else who's willing to take over the role for like Tyrion. So, but I think when someone like left it because of the LGBT issues with Rooster Teeth, it just kind of makes it like more difficult. Like, they could find an extra actor for Tyrion in the long scheme of things, but it's a bit 50-50, and as the writers are still discussing about Volume 10, it's quite likely that Tyrion could be written out of this entire show, so we don't know about that, and we don't know what Volume 10 is going to cover, but I feel with all those ideas coming over, I think it's going to be very difficult, and given the Rooster Teeth's position, which ends up like devolved into a podcast network, I think we could end up seeing a couple of more volumes of RWBY before it completely finishes, and I feel they're more likely to wash through all the plot points, just like what they did in the earlier volumes, and that is a bit of a worrying aspect to say at least.
I say that in Volume 10, we're finally going to see Tyrion die. He's the, as much as I love him as a villain, he is the biggest threat next to Cinder, because Salem, again, more behind the scenes, and Cinder is completely gimped because Silver Eyes.
I think that there's a lot of interesting things to happen with Volume 10, but I think ultimately it's up to like Warner Brothers, who didn't even feature RWBY in Multiverses and Fortnite as what Rooster Teeth hopes for, and given all this stuff, all this crap happening, I think it's just a little bit of a under the weather to see whether we could expect to see Volume 10 soon, or even the future of RWBY as a whole, because it still remains to be a niche. It's popular in Japan at the moment, but I think it's a bit up in the air to see like whether we can see more of RWBY, and I think it's more of a worry about how the Caribbean is going to approach this. But I think the real problem is to do with Rooster Teeth and how much they're not making the right kind of decisions that kind of just ends up like messing the fans up, and even have to be made to wait an extra year because of a Justice League movie.
I really hope that Japan's enjoyment of the series kind of influences Warner Brothers' decision to keep it around, because my God, how the actual hell did they get the voice actress for Ryuko Matoi to be Yang? I want to know. That was absolutely Warner Brothers money.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And the choice of like voice actresses for all those characters, that's cool. It's even cooler that they managed to dub all the volumes about like last year or two, from like Volume 5 all the way to Volume 8, and now like dubbing over yeah, that's right. They dubbed over Justice League movie, and I think they could be dubbing like Volume 9 next. So it looks like, yeah, this is actually really cool. It's a shame about the Japanese dubs. Like, I don't think they have any subtitles when you order their Blu-rays of RWBY with the Japanese dub.
It's still mostly just volumes 1 to 3, save for a couple of clips comparing Jen Taylor's performance as Salem to Kikuko Inoue's.
Yeah, that's right. And I have to admit, Jen Taylor's performance is amazing. And she voices like Cortana from Halo games and Princess Peach. And I'm amazed that Rooster Teeth has brought her over for this. In fact, there's a lot of really good choices, and I think 49 has got some really good ones. But I think it's really up to like see RWBY is able to move forward. But as you said, if it's likely that Japan might actually bring them, like try to carry the series over, then it's great. But I think it's even better to say that if RWBY gets their own studio, which I know that fans argue that it's not likely to happen because the subtlety of like Rooster Teeth. If they were to get their own studio and continue working on the show, then that's a very nice outcome for them. But I'm not sure if that's likely to happen unless they're able to like get enough support for Japan for them to keep going, or even Warner Brothers for that matter.
Yeah, again, it's like the Rooster Teeth and Warner Brothers are really kind of just rocking the boat with the fate of RWBY. I'm like, when I saw the Justice League movie trailer, I was like, dear God, if this flops, that might be the end of RWBY.
I agree. And I think if like part 1 has a good initial launch, but the sales not huge, which you can rent it on like Amazon. But I think the chances are that the movie is a bit of an odd choice, and I don't think it's likely to age well. So I do worry, as if like with this trailer end of Volume 9, I think it's just likely to like expect the worst from RWBY. But then again, if it means that we get a Volume 10 coming up, then that's cool. I mean, definitely not to be surprised about. But as I would say, it's just like, yeah, I think it's a bit bleak, but I think it's not up to us to doom and gloom about it or even expect, because I think it's just more 50-50 as I see with this. So yeah. Anyway, we're gonna wrap this up. Tell me in a few sentences on how you feel about Volume 9, the movie, and the future of the show.
I'll just get it out of the way. Again, I didn't watch the movie. I was only able to see screen caps. However, Volume 9, again, it's kind of like in the middle for me. Not good, not bad, though. And as for the future of RWBY, I just say to any fans watching this, hope for the best, prepare for the worst. Especially if you were a fan of certain Disney IPs that got cancelled like multiple times in a row.
Yeah, don't build your hopes up. But even if you feel as if Volume 10 is going to come up, then you might expect the cancellation, but who knows? If you have any strong feelings or whether you like Volume 9, then let us know in the comments. But until then, thank you for listening to this podcast. And I'm very happy to have you featured on the show, Azure. Nice to chat to you.
Thank you very much.
Yes. So, anyway, we must wrap up this episode. And thank you very much for listening. So, until then, take care. Bye.
Thank you for listening to the X Marks the Box podcast. Follow us at X Marks Box on Twitter or X Marks the Box on YouTube. And follow us on all audio podcast services. Thanks for listening.